The whispered warning. The Galactic Council chamber was silent, an unnatural stillness filling the massive hall. The room, usually a place of heated debates and diplomatic arguments, felt different today. The elders of the council sat around a long, curved table, their eyes filled with something rare: fear. Vector, a newly appointed ambassador from the Zorvax Dominion, looked around in confusion. He had spent years preparing for this moment, studying the history of galactic politics. Yet nothing in his training had prepared him for the strange tension in the room. He cleared his throat and spoke, his deep voice echoing through the chamber. "I have reviewed the records, but there is one thing I do not understand." His reptilian eyes scanned the council members. Why is Earth still untouched? The moment he spoke the name, some elders flinched. Others avoided his gaze, their expressions darkening. Vector frowned. He had expected discussions about human aggression, their wars, their unpredictable nature. But instead, there was silence. Finally, an old warlord, Elder Kraxul of the Selfar Empire, leaned forward. His mechanical eye glowed red as he stared at Vector. "You are young," Kraxul said in a grave tone, "and you do not know the old stories, the things we do not speak of." Vector's curiosity deepened. "Stories," he repeated. "You mean legends?" Kraxul let out a heavy breath, as if debating whether to continue. The other elders exchanged nervous glances. "Not legends," another voice muttered, coming from the shadowed corner of the room. It was Elder Vrelock of the Thalnari, a species known for their deep connection to ancient history. "Warnings." Vector's tail twitched in irritation. He was tired of the secrecy. Warnings of what? Kraxul tapped a command on the table, and a holographic projection appeared above them. It showed an old, grainy video, a transmission from a past expedition. The image flickered, showing a fleet of ships orbiting a blue planet. This was the last known fleet to approach Earth without permission, Kraxul explained. The video played. The ships moved closer, scanning the planet. Suddenly, one by one, they began to disappear. No explosions, no debris, no distress signals. They simply vanished into nothingness. Vector leaned forward, eyes wide. What happened to them? Elder Vrelock's voice was almost a whisper. "We do not know." The video ended with static, and the room fell silent once more. Vector's mind raced. He had studied thousands of war records, and never had he seen anything like this. Fleets were destroyed, not erased. And yet, he said slowly, humanity is still considered weak. They have no great empire, no grand fleet. How can they be a threat? Kraxul's metal fingers curled into a fist. That is exactly why they terrify us. The weight of his words settled heavily in the room. Vector took a deep breath. Something about this entire situation felt wrong. He had always believed that knowledge led to understanding. Yet the more he learned about Earth, the less sense it made. "Then why don't we investigate?" he asked. "Surely, after all these years, we can." "No." Vrelock snapped, his eyes burning with something close to panic. "The Council has decided. We do not interfere with Earth. We do not disturb what sleeps there." The word sent a chill down Vector's spine. What sleeps there? But before he could ask more, a soft beeping sound filled the room. The council members turned toward the central console. A new transmission was being received, an old forgotten signal. The source: Earth. A long-dormant distress call had just activated, and it was calling for help. The Galactic Council chamber remained frozen in silence, the eerie beeping of the ancient distress signal filling the room. Every elder present had heard it before, long ago, when they first made their decision to leave Earth untouched. But it was impossible. The signal had been dormant for centuries. Vector's heart pounded as he watched the holographic display flicker. The signal was weak, fragmented, but undeniably real. "Earth is calling for help," he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Elder Kraxul clenched his metal fingers. "This cannot be." Elder Vreelock, whose knowledge of the past exceeded them all, stared at the display with an expression of sheer horror. It means something has changed. Vector, unable to contain his frustration, stepped closer to the projection. Why does the council react this way? What is it you're all so afraid of? The room remained deathly quiet. Finally, Kraxul exhaled, tapping another command on the console. The holographic screen shifted, revealing data logs dating back over 3,000 years. Vector's scales prickled as he scanned the information. The last time this signal was activated, an empire vanished. The ancient logs told the story of the Kryn Dominion, a powerful faction that once controlled vast regions of the galaxy. They had ignored the Council's warnings and sent an armada to claim Earth. Their technology was superior, their fleet unstoppable. And yet, within days of their arrival, every single Kryn ship disappeared. No wreckage, no survivors, no explanations. The only clue was this very signal, broadcasting into the void, repeating the same desperate message over and over. Help us. It sees us. Vector swallowed hard. What? Sees them? No one answered. The council members avoided his gaze, their fear palpable. But Vector was no fool. If they weren't willing to answer, he would find the truth himself. He turned sharply. If the distress call is real, then we must investigate. If Earth is truly in danger, we cannot ignore it. Vreelock shook his head violently. No, do not interfere. Do not wake the sleeping beast. Vector narrowed his eyes. You speak in riddles, Elder. If humanity is so dangerous, why would they send a distress signal at all? If they are the ones to be feared, what could possibly threaten them? A new voice answered, one that hadn't spoken the entire session. Something older than them. Vector turned to the farthest seat in the chamber. Elder Exhale of the Vari stood, her violet eyes grim. Her species had always remained neutral in conflicts, their knowledge vast, but their actions minimal. If she was speaking now, it meant the situation was worse than he thought. Hazel walked forward, her voice solemn. We never feared the humans because of their weapons or wars. We feared them because they were never supposed to exist. Vector frowned. What do you mean? Hazel glanced at the distress signal, then back at him. A species as young as theirs should not have survived the great cycles of extinction. Their world should have fallen, like all the others before it. She paused. And yet, they did not just survive. They thrived. She gestured toward the holographic records, flipping through ancient star maps. Thousands of worlds once carried life. Civilizations greater than even the Kryn rose and fell. But there was always a pattern. She pointed at a specific timeline. Every time a civilization grew too strong, something erased them. A force, an entity, a will beyond our understanding. The Vari call it the silent hand. Others have called it the balance. It ensures no species dominates for too long. She looked straight at Vector. Except the humans. The hand never came for them. A cold shiver ran through Vector's body. Why? Before he could speak, the holographic display glitched. A new data stream forced itself onto the screen. The distress signal had changed. The transmission, once fragmented and weak, was now clearer, stronger. As if something, or someone, had noticed they were watching. Then, for the first time in galactic history, a human voice echoed through the council chamber. This is Earth. We have held the line for as long as we could. A crackle of static. But the shadows have come. The signal cut out. The chamber erupted into chaos. Elder Kraxul slammed his fist on the table. They woke it up. Vector's breathing was shallow. He had come here looking for political intrigue, for hidden secrets. But now he realized the truth was far more terrifying. Something had always been watching the galaxy, a force that erased civilizations when they became too strong. And for some reason, it had never touched Earth. Until now. Vector made his decision. I'm going to Earth. The room fell silent again. Vreelock's face turned pale. "Then may the stars have mercy on your soul." The council chamber's silence lingered long after Vector made his declaration. He could feel their stares, some filled with fear, others with quiet resignation. None of them would stop him. None of them dared. Elder Xael was the first to break the silence. "You do not understand what you are walking into." Vector's tail flicked behind him as he crossed his arms. "Then tell me." Xael hesitated before speaking. "There is a reason the Council does not interfere with Earth. There is a reason we have let them remain untouched." She glanced at the flickering hologram of the distress signal. "If the Silent Hand has finally noticed them, then whatever is happening now is beyond our power to stop." Vector shook his head. "I refuse to believe that. If Earth is in danger, we must at least understand why." Elder Xael scoffed. "You are a fool if you think knowledge will save you." Vector didn't argue. Instead, he turned toward the Council's Central Command console and input his clearance codes. His ship, the Vanguard's Resolve, was already being prepared. There was no turning back now. Xael sighed. "If you must go, take this." She extended a small data sphere, glowing faintly in her palm. Vector took it carefully. "What is it?" Xael's expression darkened. "A fragment of history we are not supposed to have. If you truly wish to understand why the Silent Hand never came for Earth, this will help you." Vector gave her a firm nod. He would review the data on his journey. As he left the council chamber, he could hear them murmuring behind him. Some called him reckless. Others whispered prayers. No one offered to come with him. The Vanguard's Resolve was a state-of-the-art exploration cruiser, sleek and built for deep space travel. Vector wasted no time in setting course for Sol. As the ship's engines roared to life, he activated the data sphere. A projection materialized before him, a galactic map, but unlike any he had ever seen. It showed the rise and fall of civilizations across time. Empires that had ruled for millennia, only to be erased. Some by war, some by natural disasters, and some by something else. Entire sectors of space marked as voided. No survivors, no explanations. But then his eyes fell on Earth. Unlike every other world, its timeline was unbroken. From its first primitive tribes to its modern advancements, it remained untouched. But why? His fingers hovered over the interface, fast-forwarding through history. That's when he saw it. A pattern. Every time a great empire was about to fall, something appeared. A presence. A force. And every time, it intervened on Earth's behalf. His scales prickled. Something had been protecting humanity. But now, for the first time, Earth had called for help. And whatever had been shielding them was gone. A proximity alert snapped him from his thoughts. He was close. The Sol system loomed ahead, the blue-green glow of Earth visible in the distance. But something was wrong. The planet was dark. No visible city lights. No active transmissions. And as his ship drew closer, he saw the wreckage. Burned-out husks of ships, human and alien alike, drifted in orbit. Some were Council designs, others unknown. But all were destroyed in the same way. Shattered. Twisted. As if something had torn through them effortlessly. A deep sense of unease crept over him. What happened here? Then his ship's scanners detected something. A single signal, weak but unmistakable, coming from the surface. Vector tightened his grip on the controls. Earth was waiting, and he was about to find out why. The Vanguard's Resolve drifted cautiously through the wreckage. Vector's claws tightened on the control panel as he maneuvered past the shattered remains of ships. Some were human, some were alien, and some he couldn't recognize. Each hull bore the same terrifying pattern, deep, jagged tears, as if something had ripped through metal like paper. The distress signal pulsed again, faint but persistent. Vector exhaled slowly. "Computer, pinpoint the source." A holographic display flickered to life, marking a location on Earth's surface. The signal came from an abandoned city near the planet's equator. At least, it should have been abandoned. His ship's scanners picked up no signs of human activity. No moving vehicles. No power grids. Just silence. Something had happened here. Something had erased a world. As the ship descended, thick clouds swallowed the view. Lightning crackled in the distance, illuminating the ruins below. The city was vast, once a beacon of civilization. But now it stood in eerie stillness. Skyscrapers partially collapsed, roads split open, entire blocks swallowed by nature's slow reclaim. Vector landed in the center of a massive plaza. Statues of human figures stood solemnly, their faces carved with expressions of defiance. Some were cracked, others toppled, yet all seemed to stare at him as he stepped onto the surface. His translator flickered to life as he read an inscription at the base of one of the statues. "We endured." The words sent a chill down his spine. This wasn't a city that had fallen without resistance. This was a graveyard of something far worse. The distress signal led him into a collapsed structure, a massive building that had once been a center of knowledge, perhaps a library or research facility. Inside, the air was stale. Dust coated the walls, and broken screens flickered weakly. Emergency power barely kept the facility running. A sudden noise made him freeze. A whisper. Faint, just beyond the corridor ahead. His claws tensed. Is someone there? Silence. Then the whisper came again, forming words his translator barely understood. "You shouldn't be here." Vector's heart pounded. He followed the sound, stepping carefully over fallen debris. As he reached a darkened hall, he noticed something unusual. Footsteps. Fresh ones. Someone, or something, was still here. Then he saw it. A flickering projection, old and damaged, but unmistakably human. A woman, clad in what looked like military attire, her face partially obscured by static. Her voice was weak, distorted. "If you are seeing this, it means we failed." Vector's throat tightened. The message continued. They came. Not the silent hand. Something. Worse. Something we were never meant to fight. Asterisk asterisk. Static cut through her words. Then a single phrase emerged clearly. "If they are still here, run." The projection vanished. And behind him, something moved in the darkness. Vector spun around, his eyes scanning the darkness. The air felt heavier now, as if something unseen pressed against his chest. The message had warned him. Something worse than the silent hand had come to Earth. And it wasn't gone. The shadows shifted. At first, he thought it was just debris shifting in the wind. But then he saw it. Movement. A figure, barely distinguishable from the darkness itself, stood at the far end of the ruined corridor. It wasn't human. It wasn't like anything he had seen before. And it was watching him. Vector's claws hovered over his sidearm, his mind racing. The figure didn't move, didn't breathe, just stood there. He forced himself to speak. "Identify yourself." Silence. Then a whisper. "They left." His translator struggled to process the words. The voice was hollow, layered, as if multiple beings spoke at once. Vector's grip tightened. Who left? The figure twitched, just slightly, just enough for Vector to realize it wasn't standing on the ground. It was hovering. A deep, cold dread settled in his chest. The humans hadn't been wiped out. They had been taken. The lights in the ruined corridor flickered. For a brief second, the shadows peeled away just enough for Vector to see the figure clearly. It wasn't alien. It wasn't machine. It was wrong. Twisted limbs, shifting patterns on what should have been skin. Eyes that weren't eyes, but something else entirely. Something watching him through layers of reality. And then it spoke again. "You were not meant to be here." The walls trembled. The structure groaned as if responding to the voice itself. Vector took a step back. He had seen war. He had seen destruction. But this was something different. This was something he couldn't fight. The figure moved, not with steps, not with motion, but by simply existing in a new place. One moment, it was at the far end of the hall. The next, it was closer. Too close. You need to leave. Vector's instincts screamed at him. He had come to Earth looking for answers. But what he had found? He turned and ran. The building shook. Dust rained from the ceiling as the very fabric of the place seemed to warp. The distress signal still echoed faintly in the background, but he ignored it. Whatever had happened to humanity, whatever had taken them, was still here, and it had just noticed him. He reached the exit, diving into the open air just as something behind him let out a sound that wasn't a sound at all, a whisper that reached through his skull, unraveling his thoughts. His ship's engines roared to life. Vector slammed into the pilot's seat, his claws shaking as he punched the launch sequence. The ground trembled as his ship tore into the sky. As he ascended, he dared to look down one last time. The city was gone. Not destroyed. Not abandoned. Just gone. Like it had never existed. And in its place, they watched. Vector's ship tore through the atmosphere, but his mind was still trapped in the ruins of Earth. The thing he had seen, the whispering figure, wasn't just a specter of war. It was something worse. He forced his hands to steady over the controls. His mission had been simple: investigate Earth, confirm its fall, report back. But now, nothing was simple. His scanners blinked wildly. Earth's surface, it was changing. The data feed blurred, flickering between readings. One moment, it showed a lifeless, war-torn planet. The next, nothing. No ruins, no wreckage, no sign that humanity had ever existed. He stared in disbelief. Planets didn't just disappear, unless someone made them disappear. His ship's alarms blared. An incoming transmission. Static hissed through the cockpit. Vector's claws tightened on the armrests. Then, through the interference, came a voice. They are watching. It was not human. Not fully. They do not forget. Vector's breath caught. It was the same voice from the ruins. A shadow passed over his ship. Something enormous moved in the void. He turned his gaze to the viewport and felt fear like never before. A shape loomed beyond the planet. At first, it looked like a ship, but no metal gleamed, no engines burned. It was wrong. A mass of shifting black. It pulsed, warping space itself. And then it opened its eyes. Not one, not 10, thousands, each one reflecting the stars, the past, the future, each one watching him. Vector's instincts screamed, flee, now. His ship's thrusters ignited, engines roaring as he tried to escape, but space stretched. The stars around him bent. Something gripped the fabric of reality itself and pulled. A whisper slithered through the cockpit. You were never meant to know. Vector's vision blurred, his own thoughts unraveled, his past flickering in and out of existence. For a moment, he wasn't sure if he had ever even been to Earth. Had he imagined it? Had humanity ever existed? No. He clenched his fists. This was real. This was happening. And whatever was out there, whatever had taken humanity, wanted to erase more than just a planet. It wanted to erase the truth. Vector forced his ship forward. He fought against the pull, against the whispers clawing at his mind. And then, light. A sudden surge, a rupture in space. His ship broke free. For a second, the darkness hesitated. Then it faded. The stars returned to normal. The whispers fell silent. And Earth was gone. Not destroyed. Not abandoned. Just erased. Vector's hands shook over the controls. He stared at the empty void where a planet, where an entire species should have been. His mind screamed for answers, but there were none. Only one truth remained. Something had taken humanity. And it wasn't done yet. Vector's ship drifted in the emptiness where Earth had once been. The void outside was silent, But his mind was a battlefield of thoughts, questions, and fear. Humanity was gone, not destroyed, not conquered, erased. But by what? The whispers still echoed in his head. The watching eyes lingered in his vision, even when he closed his own. Something ancient, something beyond the Galactic Council's understanding, had hidden humanity away. Or worse, had claimed them. His ship's console beeped. A new message had arrived. It wasn't from the Council. It wasn't from any known source. Vector hesitated before opening it. The screen flickered. Words appeared. The war never ended. His blood ran cold. Another message followed. They were never defeated. They were taken. Vector's claws trembled as he typed a response. Who? Who took them? Silence. Then, a final message. Run. His ship's alarm screamed. A gravitational anomaly was forming behind him. Vector spun his ship around and froze. The void rippled like disturbed water. The same darkness that had swallowed Earth was forming again, and from within it, something stepped forward. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't a being. It was a memory, a presence, a nightmare, a shape almost human. Its form was blurred, shifting between what was and what shouldn't be. And yet, Vector knew. This was not an enemy. This was a warning. A final whisper brushed against his mind. They remember, and soon they will return. The darkness collapsed. The anomaly vanished. Vector was left staring into the void, his mind racing. The war never ended. Humanity was not lost. They were waiting. And when they returned, the galaxy would never be the same.